Hattori Hanzo, samurai, and later on, ninja. A man whose life is as shrouded in mystery as his own death. Also known and nicknamed Oni no Hanzo, standing for Demon Hanzo. A lot of Hanzo's history is very dubious and mysterious, and a lot of it cannot be confirmed as fact. This is one of the most interesting characters in Japanese history, but is one of those that we know very little about, and what we do know, we're not entirely sure how much of it is true. There's a lot of reasons that this could be. Could be for the fact that he wasn't of a noble bloodline. He wasn't a man who was at an extremely high position of public importance, like a shogun. In fact, the nature of his work, as he's famously known as a ninja, or even as a commander of a certain unit, it's not a very prominent public figure in Japanese history. So he's not mentioned a lot, and a lot of it has to do with his work as well. When it comes to work of recovering hostages in secrecy in the middle of the night, assassinations, tracking down enemies of the shogun, a lot of this is not public. In fact, it could have been even seen as dishonorable, some of the things that he was doing, and the own shogun didn't want his name associated with some of the things that he was commanding this man of doing. For that reason, probably a lot of his feats and a lot of the things that he accomplished or did, he was never really publicly recognized for it, specifically because we didn't want to hurt the image of the shogun, or we didn't want to put his own life in danger. In general, the type of work that he did commanded a certain level of secrecy. So that's why a lot of the things that he did cannot really be confirmed, because there's not that many historical accounts of what he's done. But for this mystery and for these different reasons, he's become a very famous character in pop culture, and in general, ninjas are very famous. And even that, in itself, is questionable in some ways, because even the title of ninja or being a shinobi, being a ninja in Japan, is something that often means multiple different things, and that's a conversation entirely of its own. And it's very hard for historians to come to an agreement. The term ninja, some people believe it originated from the province of Iga, and the only ninja that have ever existed are people who came from that province. That it's like a title to define who these people were because of their recipes for bomb making, the way, subterfuge, and the way they fought in general. And they're credited with these different martial arts and ninja techniques that only they knew. Other historians believe that ninja is just a title for a job or a sub-role within a unit. So within a unit, you have a commander, you have a medic, you have all these different roles, right? So some people believe that the ninja was the scout or the pathfinder for the unit. Others believe that that is a title specifically given to a spy, right? Other people believe that ninja is an assassin. So there is all these different disagreements from different historians from what being a ninja actually is. And it could have been that the term started out as meaning one thing, as people who are actually ninjas as we know in the traditional sense that belong to this province, and later it became known as something else. A lot of historians believe that samurais took on the role of a ninja a lot of times. That in certain points of history, certain samurai were given the job or the sub-job and the duty of being a ninja, of being a spy, of being counterintelligence, of being a pathfinder. So we don't really know if there is this specific unit or this specific individual that is given a job of being an assassin and just wears black and does what we would think a ninja does in the traditional sense. We don't know. However, throughout this video, I'm going to be referring to Hattori Hanzo as a ninja simply because the things that he is credited with doing and is famous for, we most traditionally would know as being a ninja, and we would attribute it to being that, right? And he is known as being the leader of a group of ninjas too. So keep that in mind. So Hattori Hanzo was a very famous samurai during the Sengoku era. He served under the Tokugawa clan as a general, and he is credited with saving the life of Tokugawa Ieyasu and helping him become the ruler of the United Japan. So Tokugawa Ieyasu was the founder and first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan, which ruled between 1603 up until 1868. Tokugawa Ieyasu is famous because he's credited as being one of the three great unifiers of Japan. Because up until that point, prior to the unifiers, prior to Oda Nobunaga, Japan was in this constant state of civil war, and multiple disputes between different daimyos, which are leaders of different clans, to see who was going to be the shogun, who was going to really be the true leader of Japan and unify the country. He's known as one of those three great unifiers. That's why he's so famous. So Hattori Hanzo was the son of Hattori Yasunaga. He was a minor samurai that was in service at the time the clan Matsudaira, which later became the famous Tokugawa clan. So again, Hattori Hanzo became known as Onino Hanzo later in his life, which stands for, again, Demon Hanzo. That was the nickname he was given. A lot of people think that that's the nickname he got because he was a ninja, and later in his life, this actually was way before he became known as a ninja. This was just when he was a samurai and as a commander. He actually earned a nickname for multiple reasons that we're going to cover, multiple battles that he won, but mainly for being an extremely brilliant tactician of the time. So Hanzo was born in the Mikawa province, but he often would return to the Iga province, which was a very important province, and we will cover the importance and the significance of this province and this tie that he had with the place very soon. This province at the time was known for being where what we know as ninjas at the time originated from. The reason why he had this connection and a certain level of camaraderie and also would return to this province often to visit is because that's where his family originated from. The Hattori family was originally from the Iga province. So the Iga province is a very famous province because it caused a lot of problems for Oda Nobunaga. This was before Hattori Hanzo's time. This was before Ieyasu came to power and before Shogun. This was when the first quote-unquote great unifier of Japan, Oda Nobunaga, was raging his campaigns to try to conquer the vast majority of the provinces around him. And this is something I made a video on, which is the unification of Owari. You can take a look at that video or do your own research on this. But essentially what happened is the Iga province was a massive pain in the neck for Oda Nobunaga. They were constantly raiding supply lines. They had tried to send minor forces there before and had gotten defeated. And nobody quite understood what was going on, why they couldn't take this place that didn't have that many peasants, didn't have that many, soldiers in general, didn't have that many people there. So what was so hard about it? So in order to try to prove himself to his dad, Oda Nobunaga's son, Nobukatsu, took about 8,000 soldiers, which was his main force, to go and try to destroy the Iga or conquer the Iga province to kind of show his dad his worth. He took a couple more less organized but smaller forces as well, and they got completely crushed by a significantly lower amount of troops that weren't decorated samurai or anything like that. They were pretty much just peasants, thieves as they were called, and whatnot. So the way they lost was mostly using guerrilla tactics. They were known for having recipes for bombs. They had different weapons and techniques that they used to stealth, hide in the bushes, hide in the forest, and they were always waiting for these forces, and they caught them by surprise. And they were able to destroy this much, much bigger and more decorated army. Later on, Nobunaga, who was also an extremely brilliant tactician, who also made heavy use of guerrilla warfare tactics and was pretty well versed with how things worked at this point, sent several scouts, and after the initial failure of his son, he got a better grasp and understanding of what the Iga province forces consisted of, and he just completely crushed them later on. But this province became very famous because for the amount of people that lived there, and for there not really being a whole lot of military force and equipment, somehow they always managed to defeat much bigger armies, and they seemed to be a complete pain and threat at that time for Oda Nobunaga, like I said, raiding supply lines and things like that. So at one point he had to send a really big army there to deal with them. But that is the importance. They were already famous way before that as these really sneaky, crafty individuals who are credited with being the original ninjas. And again, this is important because this is where Hattori's family comes from. So even though Hanzo wasn't really born there, the Hattori family is from this location. They are descendants of the Iga province. So that earned him a certain amount of cred and camaraderie with these people, which later will be important because he comes to lead a whole unit that consists of soldiers from this particular province, which is why later he is known as the commander of ninja, because he has an entire unit under his command of ninjas. So he's not just a ninja himself, he commands other ninjas as well. And again, the actual history and what was really going on in the Iga province and who the Hattori family was and their significance in this province, that is all very shrouded in mystery. A lot of it, and the whole thing with the ninja, was keeping their recipes, weapons, fighting techniques, martial art styles, everything about their culture was kept in secrecy. They were not very public about it. That was their strength, their enemies not knowing a whole lot about them. And it is believed that actually a lot of these archives, a lot of the scrolls and things that held a lot of this information were destroyed during several invasions and later on. Some people even say that they destroyed that themselves to not give away the province and the family secrets. So we don't know how much of it is true. A lot of it is mystery. A lot of it is probably myth. What we do know, and what is in fact historical fact, are that these battles did happen. So the fact that Oda Nobukatsu get defeated in this battle very humiliatingly with a much smaller army and how they went about doing this, that is historical fact. We just don't know how much of it is true in the sense of how incredible as warriors necessarily were they. We don't really know how close to ninjas in the traditional sense that we know are. And that's kind of my point with a lot of this video and a lot of the things that I'm trying to tell you, the story of this ninja, while also kind of explaining the picture that you have in your head of probably the type of ninja that they were, how we have in modern stories and folklores and movies and TV shows and whatnot, is probably not quite what they were. But they were in fact known for making use of unconventional weaponry and warfare like smoke bombs, hiding in under the ground and bushes and things like that. They were known for unique weaponry and things like that. Unique war tactics in general that clearly were very effective, and they were well known for being formidable force multipliers. Now, how they achieved that, that's a little unsure. We're kind of left up to our imagination at that point. But that gives credence and goes to explain where Hanzo got so much of this knowledge, where his fame as a ninja came from, where all his knowledge of guerrilla warfare tactics and these unconventional methods, where they came from. A lot of it is because of where his family's from. A lot of this knowledge, because he had this connection with this province that was so secretive, with their arts, with their techniques, a lot of it was probably shared with him because of that familial connection. It's not something that was just shared with everybody. And also later on, for them to be willing to submit under his command and become an actual military unit, which were known as an army of ninja or a unit of ninja, probably comes from that tie that the family had. It's almost like you have a birthright to some of these secret arts that we normally don't share with everybody and our forces. That's probably where a lot of that knowledge and affinity comes from. It's from that blood tie. So Hanzo's first battle happened as early as the age of 15. Some people say 16, some people say 15. But very fitting for his later reputation, this was a nighttime attack during the siege of the Udo Castle, which happened in 1557. So Hanzo was very important to Ieyasu and is credited with being responsible and one of the main contributors for Tokugawa Ieyasu's rise to power as shogun. In 1561, Ieyasu's wife and son were captured and made hostages by the Imagawa clan. And in 1562, Hanzo made and conducted a successful hostage rescue of the Tokugawa's family at Kaminogo Castle. And then he went on to lay siege to the Kakegawa Castle in 1569 against the Imagawa clan once again. So not only did this man fight his first battle and help to lay siege to the Udo Castle in 57 at the age of 15 or 16, we're unsure, but in 1551, after his lord's wife and son were captured hostages, he managed to conduct a hostage rescue in 52 and return them back home to his lord. And then after that, in 1569, he went to lay on siege to the Kakegawa Castle against, again, the Imagawa clan. So Hanzo is proving himself very loyal and important to Ieyasu. As early as 15 or 16, he's already helping his lord lay siege to a key castle that he was trying to take over. He is later credited in conducting a successful operation to save Ieyasu's own wife and son, and later helps lay siege to a key military castle, which was the Kakegawa Castle in 1569, against his enemies, the Imagawa clan. And this battle, the siege of the Kakegawa Castle, was very important not only from a military standpoint, but it was very personal for Ieyasu as well. Because the son of Yoshimoto, Imagawa Yoshimoto, who was the father of Ujizani Imagawa, Ujizane, who was the one in charge of this castle, is actually the individual who held captive and hostage Ieyasu's wife and son, who Hanzo actually helped rescue. So not only did he rescue his family from this man, he helped him defeat the man that took his family later on too. So this relationship was becoming very personal. Almost immediately after, a year later after taking the Kakagawa castle during this event, he goes on in 1570 to serve in the Battle of Onagawa and the Battle of, forgive my pronunciation here, Mikatagahara in 1572. So this battle that happened in 1570, the Battle of Onagawa that Hanzo was a part of, it was of extreme importance because this was the first battle that Nobunaga fought as an ally with Tokugawa Ieyasu, where Hanzo was a part of, against the forces of the Azai and the Asakura clans. This was an important battle for Oda Nobunaga because it helped him break away from a very unbalanced alliance that he had with the Azai. And by helping him in this battle, he proved to be an ally to someone that went on to be an extremely powerful character in Japan, as the first great unifier there in Japanese history, Oda Nobunaga. So he helped his lord win a battle that helped him solidify an alliance with probably the most important and strongest military figure in early Japanese history. The Battle of Mikatagahara was not as honorable. This is a battle where they actually got defeated. This is after the Oda clan again was already allies with the Tokugawa clan. They were attacked by the Takeda clan in 1573. They attacked Ieyasu during their campaign against Oda Nobunaga, and the Tokugawa/Oda force was almost completely annihilated, with only a few surviving. His forces were completely encircled, and almost all of Ieyasu's retainers were killed, but not Hanzo. Important to mention that this was a battle of 35,000 from Takeda against 11,000 from Nobunaga. So this was a 3-1 battle where they were completely encircled, they got absolutely massacred, and somehow Hanzo managed to survive and get away. So even though they lost this battle because of Hanzo's notable contributions, leadership, and prowess during this battle, he is recognized once again by Ieyasu, and he is granted the title of commander. He is also granted a unit consisting of 150 men from the very Iga province where his family originates from. And this is the point where Hanzo starts being known as a commander of a unit of ninjas. This is where he starts becoming known as a ninja, because again, the Iga province is known as that province of ninjas, where Hanzo still has that connection to, because that's where the Hattori family originates from, which is his family. So this is a pretty interesting moment here, because after Oda Nobunaga takes his revenge and defeats the Iga and the ninja of the Iga, they scatter all over Japan. They run to different places seeking refuge, and you have all these different ninjas taking their techniques and their skills all over the country seeking refuge in different places. And one of those places that they go to seek refuge is Ieyasu, is the Tokugawa clan. And it's interesting that Ieyasu takes 150 of these ninja and makes a unit out of them and places them under the direct command of Hanzo, who again, his name is Hattori Hanzo, and the Hattori family originates from the Iga province. So perhaps that's where that was intentional, because there was already some sort of built loyalty there. These are not samurai, right? The ninja are not samurai. They're not considered honorable, quote unquote. And they're seen as a group of people that doesn't have a lot of loyalty to the shogunate. They could revolt at any time. So perhaps it was strategic, and it is of some significance, that he chose to place a large group of them under direct command of a descendant of this province. Perhaps that's where a lot of the loyalty and respect for their commander comes from, because there's a direct bloodline from the place that they originate from. So continuing on here with Hanzo's story. He later on then captures a Takeda spy named Shikuan, Takeda again being that clan that defeated Hanzo in the siege of that castle where they were encircled earlier on. And when the Takeda troops finally invade Toyotomi, Hanzo's already waiting for them, and he counterattacks with only 30 warriors that were already waiting, laying there by the Tenryu River. Now, much like a lot of Hanzo's story and the things that he did, not much is known about this battle or how exactly they did this. All we know is that Hanzo and the Iga warriors, these ninja, were very notorious force multipliers because of the different techniques, skill, and warfare tactics that they had. Somehow, some way, it is not very well documented, with 30 warriors, he managed to fend off this invasion and counterattack the Takeda forces. So this is a point again where I think it's worth mentioning. This is kind of the start of the legend of Hanzo, I should say, where Hanzo becomes this very mythological, almost legendary type of character, where a lot of things we start not knowing what a lot of it is fact or isn't. It isn't really in question that he did counterattack with 30 men. He was famous for that. All of these battles and things that happened are not necessarily all in question. What is in question is how he went about doing them, what he was really capable of, because there's this supernatural component that he became known for, right? People believe he could go invisible. People believed he could teleport and different things that obviously he couldn't. We don't really know exactly how he went about accomplishing a lot of his feats, a lot of these things. And frankly, probably a lot of the assignments that he has and a lot of the things that he was asked to do by Ieyasu, there's probably no even account of it. Because if you think of it, a ninja, someone who is, shrouded in secrecy and is doing things in the dark and in secret, is probably very similar to like what a private military would do, what we know now as Black Ops soldiers, right? These soldiers that don't necessarily represent any country, we don't know who they are, and they go in and they carry some sort of shadowy or nebulous task for a government. They're in and out, and we don't even know who did it type of thing. We just know someone died, right? There's probably a lot of that we don't know of that Hanzo was a part of and was in charge. There's probably a lot of things that he was commanded to do by Ieyasu that we will never know of because he was never recognized for it. Because again, Ieyasu didn't want to be recognized for those murders or recognized for those operations. So a lot of what he probably did was done in secrecy and we'll never know about it. And what little we do know, we don't quite know exactly how he went about it. We just know that it happened. An interesting event here too, displaying Hanzo's loyalty, is when Ieyasu's son, he gets accused of treason. And Oda Nobunaga orders the ritual disembowelment of his son, which is essentially called seppuku. It is considered an honorable thing in Japan. We don't need to get too much into that subject, but it's a pretty common thing in Japan. And essentially, it doesn't go so well, the attempt. He doesn't completely finish the job, and he's still suffering. So normally, there is a second person there waiting with a sword, so that once you perform seppuku, so that you don't continue suffering, somebody goes and just cuts your head off, right? And Hanzo was ordered to do that, but he refused because he said that essentially he was not willing to take the sword to his lord's own blood. So he wasn't willing to harm in any way his lord's son, no matter the reason. So Ieyasu was very moved by this action. He felt like that was a big display of loyalty, and famously says that even a demon has a heart, or something along those lines. This is seen as a very big deal. A lot of people might think, well, he was already dying anyway, why not finish the job, and so on. Well, he refused an order from Oda Nobunaga. He refused doing this. And what could happen is this could have been seen by Oda Nobunaga as a sign of disrespect. And Oda Nobunaga could have commanded Ieyasu to punish or kill Hanzo because of this disrespect. So if you think about it, he took a huge risk on a man that was already dead anyway, simply because of sheer loyalty. One of the things that we do know that he did, and he is very famous for doing, is escorting Ieyasu. After Oda Nobunaga died, there was a lot of turmoil in Japan. Every time a shogun dies, every time a daimyo dies, there is a lot of war and conflict that follows. And it was especially no different when the most important man in Japanese history died, the great unifier. Suddenly, Japan was in turmoil. Tensions were starting to brew again to see who was going to be the next leader of Japan. And because Ieyasu was one of Nobunaga's most prominent allies, he was suddenly a huge target. Nobunaga's death came at a huge surprise. I mean, he was seemingly unstoppable, but he ended up being assassinated by another samurai. And again, this puts a huge target on Ieyasu's back. He is one of the warlords that does have the military power to become the next shogun. So for other competitors, it's of extreme importance to try to get rid of him as soon as possible. And Ieyasu is very far away from home at this point. When he learns that Nobunaga dies, he needs to rush back home to safety. And he is escorted back by Hanzo and about 300 men under his command as well, all while being pursued by Mitsuhide, who was known as the assassin of Nobunaga as well. On his way back, Ieyasu was pursued not only by Mitsuhide, but it seems like a lot of different warlords, generals were trying to get rid of him, different assassins and whatnot. And he relied on Hanzo to guide him back home, and he was able to travel safely through different provinces, one of them being the province there of Iga, where Hanzo knew the local people because that's where his family's from, and all these ninjas are from as well that are under his command. He was able to get help there from the locals and successfully escorted his master back home. That is one of the things that he is most famous for. We don't know necessarily how much confrontation there was. It sounds like there was confrontation along the way. We don't exactly know what happened there. What we do know is that if he was not escorted by Hanzo to safety, he would probably have been killed on the way. And this is the man that later does become the shogun. So his rise to power there and final success in seizing that power once Nobunaga dies, a lot of it is attributed to Hanzo, not because of everything only that he's done up until this point, but he secured his lord's safety on the way home, where if he had been killed, he wouldn't have been able to achieve that. So we don't exactly know everything that happened along the way. We don't know how many people they had to defend them from. We don't know how big of a force he was able to contain. We don't know exactly how that happened. But what is important is that he transported the master to safety, and that guy later became the shogun. Much like most things about Hanzo's life and events that take place, we don't exactly know every single detail about how it exactly happened. We just know that it did happen, which leaves a lot to the imagination, mystery, and I think that's why a lot of people think this character is very interesting and cool, is because he's attributed with so many different supernatural and incredible feats without us really knowing the details, right? So a lot of it is, there's a legend, it's left up for imagination, people make up stories about him, and we don't quite know what the truth is. We just know that some way or somehow he did accomplish those things. So following these events in 1584, Hanzo continues to serve his lord in the Battle of Komaki and Nagakute, with 100 warriors under his command. The Battle of Komaki and Nagakute are the two most famous battles, but these are essentially a series of battles, and often this gets referred as the Komaki campaign, because it wasn't just two battles, but these are the two most famous ones. And Hanzo was serving the entire way Ieyasu. This battle was fought between Hideyoshi and Nobukatsu, who was one of Oda Nobunaga's sons, allied with Ieyasu. So he continues to serve his lord as a commander after all these events as well. So by the time he's done serving in this campaign, he is awarded a small fortune. Now finally, we come to an interesting part of the story, Hanzo's death, because we are not entirely sure how he dies. Much like how we're not entirely sure about anything about his life, really, we are not exactly sure about his death. There are three main theories of how Hanzo died, and again, we don't know which one is right, but we'll go over all three of them. The first theory, and probably the coolest of all the theories, is that he was assassinated by another ninja called Fumiko Taro. Fumiko Taro is the leader of another ninja clan called the Fuma clan, and he is a very interesting character, also shrouded in a lot of mystery, that probably deserves a video of his own, so we won't get too much into it. But essentially, Hanzo is ordered to track him down and kill him. What is said is that he lures him in and Hanzo's men into a small channel, and he has oil there and sets everybody on fire. That is one of the theories. He is assassinated by another ninja that he's pursuing. The second theory, not so interesting. They say that Hanzo becomes a monk and he essentially retires and just meditates for the rest of his life until he dies. And then we have the third and final theory, which I tend to believe is the most probable one, but who knows? He died of natural causes. He had some sort of illness, which is how a lot of these people died. I don't know. The first theory sounds cooler, right? He's pursuing another ninja and gets killed. I think that by this point, he is on retirement mode, right? So after he's awarded all this money, why would he continue working? It almost seems like he's kind of served his time. He's getting older. I don't think he would still be in service in that capacity necessarily, but I could be wrong. Maybe he'd never wanted to retire anyway, but I find it unlikely that he would still be doing something like this at that age. And with this level of wealth now and essentially ability to retire, right? So I do think it is more, and I do think that it's unlikely that he became a monk as well, simply because of the type of life he had lived up to that point. But who knows? I do think the most likely cause of death is just natural illness. So after Hanzo dies, his son, Masanari, which essentially is the third Hanzo. It's funny because Hanzo is the second Hanzo. Hanzo's dad is the first. Now it's the third Hanzo. They're not very creative with the names. This is just his son now, the third Hanzo. So he is essentially given These men who used to be under his father's command, the Iga ninjas, now become his own army under his command, and they essentially become guards of the Edo Castle, which is the headquarters of the government of the United Japan of that point. And it's funny because the name Hanzo gets passed down to leaders from this clan, the Hattori family, so there's a total of actually 5 Hanzos in history. And Japan till this day makes homage to Hanzo in different ways, where now is the Tokyo Imperial Palace, which used to be the Shogun's Palace. There is a gate that's called still Hanzo's Gate. There's also a subway line named after him, Hanzomon Subway Line, and a whole station also named Hanzomon Station. So we will just briefly discuss here a little bit of the history of Hattori Hanzo's son, Hattori Masanari, which was the third Hanzo. He had been fighting along his father since the mid-1590s, and he succeeded him in 1596 at the age of 31. Following the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Masanari was enlisted by Tokugawa Ieyasu as a captain of the Edo Castle Guards, which we discussed a little bit before. This band now of ninjas that was in command originally of his father was now under his command. However, they rebelled after the way he got treated after an unfortunate event and mistake. Essentially, Masanari and his band of ninjas were entrusted with the duty of capturing and tracking down a couple people, and they ended up killing the wrong man in a case of mistaken identity. And this was extremely humiliating for them because Masanari was then relieved of his position because of this mistake, and it was very humiliating for the clan. So because of this, the band of ninjas, they dispersed at that point. They rebelled. In order to try to repair the Hattori name and his reputation, Masanari fought during the siege of Osaka between 1614 and 1615 as the head of 60 Iga ninjas. I'm not entirely sure if it was the same band of ninjas, like 60 of them that still stayed around, or if it was entirely new band of ninjas from the province of Iga at that point. I do know that the original unit, though, did rebel in this band. He was then cut down in the process of the second siege of Osaka, and he was succeeded by his brother, Hattori Masashige. Hattori Masashige, he was a Edo period ninja, and he was the fourth Hattori Hanzo. He fought his first battle at the age of 20, the Battle of Sekigahara, and went on to fight in the siege of Osaka as well with his brother, which is where, unfortunately, his brother died, and he then succeeded him. He continued to serve the Tokugawa after they secured the shogunate. So it's interesting to see that the entire legacy of this clan and this family, the Hattori family, is of service to the Tokugawa clan, no matter what happens. I thought it was important to discuss the following Hanzos a little bit as well, because I have seen other videos discussing this particular subject, and I've heard things along the lines that his son was a drunk. Him and his brother were completely spoiled because of the wealth they inherited from the second Hanzo, the original Hanzo there that we know, and that they were, extremely bad commanders, and they were disgraceful to the name of the clan and all that. And that's not really the case. I mean, his son had been fighting together with his father since pretty early on, and his brother also, who followed his death, the death of Hanzo's son, also had been valiantly fighting by his side ever since. So that's not really entirely true, and actually true at all. It's not quite true that they were completely spoiled, they didn't fight, and they just kicked back and got drunk. I've heard that a few times. That is not the case at all. I've heard in other popular videos on this subject as well that the whole reason for Hanzo's son's ninjas rebelling against him is because he was such a dishonorable character. He was a drunk, he was spoiled, and he didn't live up to par to his father's name. And that's not really what happened. The rebellion of the ninja wasn't exactly against him. It was because of the way he was treated. The rebellion was against the Tokugawa and not against the son itself. So I've heard that incorrectly said a few times. Again, the ninja didn't rebel against the son because of the mistake that he made. They rebelled because of the way he got treated. And there's no real indication of his son being some sort of spoiled brat. He was fighting along his father since pretty young. And so was his brother. And like I had said in the past as well, probably a lot of the things that Hanzo did were intentionally not exposed. Because if you think about it, if you have this game of geopolitics, right, where all these different lords are competing for power, a lot of what they could be trying to do can't be flat out exposed because it can start a war. Right? A lot of times you might be wanting to get rid of a key asset, you're trying to get rid of a certain individual or something like that, but you can't flat out just say, I command my troops to go and kill this guy, because you're going to start a war, right? So he probably employed Hanzo and others to do a lot of this type of work, And we're really not going to know that it actually happened because it was all done in secrecy. And if it was ever exposed that he commanded this operation to happen, or this assassination, or that Hanzo's the one that carried it out, Ieyasu would suddenly look like a traitor or like someone that was dishonorable or even start a war. So probably a lot of the things that he did, this type of mission, this type of work that he did, assassinations are done in the way they're done for a reason, right? You're not supposed to know who necessarily commanded them in most cases. So that is probably why we don't know a lot of what Hanzo actually did. And I don't think it's far-fetched at all to think that he did employ Hanzo to do multiple different types of jobs that we will never know about because they were never intended to be exposed based on their nature. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe. I'm always happy to do more of these videos. It would be interesting to do a video on the ninja that is said to have killed Hanzo on one of those theories, Fumakotaro as well. He is not as interesting in my opinion as Hanzo, but perhaps a video that could be made as well. Thank you so much. Have a great week.